Hi, it's Susan again from the Mother's Milk Bank of the Western Great Lakes, and I am back with Gail at New Mother New Baby to talk about cleaning pump parts. There's lots of different pump parts, lots of different pumps like we talked about in our last video, but a lot of them all break down to one or two different types of valves and membranes, which are the pieces that we really need to keep clean.
Right.
So let's talk about those.
Okay, well, this is the Spectra parts and the Spectra pump, this is the S1. So with this pump, this is the backflow protector right here, this piece. And generally, you may not have to wash this in between pumpings, but you will want to wash it before the first use. And so what you can do is just open up these pieces. You're gonna, before the first use, it's always good to sterilize your parts. And that means a big pot of boiling water, put your parts in for 10 or 15 minutes. Some of the manufacturer directions have said, I've read a lot of different ones, and they'll say use a big pot so all the pieces aren't bumping into each other as much as possible. So don't use a small pot, but use a larger size pot. With this one, with the Spectra, you're just kind of folding this over the lip of this side, and this whole, all three pieces are called the backflow protector. So it keeps the milk from backing up into the tubing and getting bacteria into the pump, into the tubing. And then
So that connects to the tube, right?
Yes, this connects to the tube right here.
And then the other side
connects to the actual pump. So there's that. So now you would be all together and you would plug it into the actual pump, which there's two pieces here, so you can single or double pump. If you're single pumping, you're going to close off one piece here. And if you're double pumping, we would have another piece of tubing in here. Then, so I took off the backflow protector, and then there's three pieces to the Spectra pump. There's the bottle. This is called the flange, or the breast shield. And this piece right here is called the duckbill valve. And that, so all three of these pieces are the pieces you're going to wash, and then you want them to be dry before you pump again. So it's good to lay them out, let them air dry, or if you have a sterilizer that dries, they may be dry after an hour of going through the sterilization. And then to put it back together, you just put this on, and then you put this on like that, and then you're ready to go again.
So now for the Spectra, correct me if I'm wrong, but this duckbill valve right here is sort of critical, right?
Yes.
Like this is what makes the pump have suction.
Right.
So this needs to be replaced pretty frequently, right?
Yes, probably every 2 months, or maybe even every month if you're if you're an exclusive pumper, I would definitely replace it every month. Otherwise, maybe every 2 to 3 months, depending on how often you pump.
I'll be honest, I had multiples of these at all times because as a working mom, I felt like I was pumping all the time.
Right.
And having just one set of parts wasn't enough. And when it was time to replace them, you really can't tell when they've broken down. So I would say just replace all of them, just to be on the safe side, because you don't want to think that it's your milk supply that's suffering when it's something as simple as a little inexpensive duckbill valve.
Right.
So.
Yes, correct.
And it seems like a lot of the other pumps are also duckbill valves. Is that correct?
Yes, all the different pumps seem like they have some kind of vacuum piece in, which is a duckbill valve.
Yep,
It seems
I see
like they're
another
becoming
little
more and more
duckbill
popular.
valve in there.
Yeah, that's a duckbill valve. This is the Amani 2 breast pump, and from Legendary Milk. And this one, actually, Legendary Milk doesn't make this pump, but they sell it. So, but yes, there is a duckbill valve here too. So you would be in this type of a pump, you would be taking this off. This is the motor, so you don't ever want to wash the motor or you'll ruin your pump. And then this comes out, and then there's
so there's your membrane, right? That's your backflow protector?
Yeah, and there's your duckbill valve. Sometimes when you're pumping too, there's a little milk gets stuck in here, so you always want to kind of go like that to get a little extra milk out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or the tap-tap method.
Yeah,
Yep.
tap.
So the other one that I'm super familiar with is the Medela, and they have a little bit of a different valve and membrane system. So any of the Medela pumps, whether we're looking at the Harmony or the Pump and Style or the Symphony, they all use the same valve and membrane system.
Right.
And it's very important to take things all the way apart and clean them. I know we've worked with patients who didn't realize they were supposed to be taking their pumps apart because it doesn't always come off easily. Sometimes they can be a little sticky, but you do need to take it all the way apart and make sure you're cleaning the valve and the membrane. You want to show that one?
Right. Yeah, no, I've had people who Is this the stuck one?
Is that the stuck one? We have
Sometimes
another one. See, perfect example. They can be really sticky.
Sometimes if they're stuck, you want to put them in a basin of warm water, which is also a good way to just clean your pumps. You can put a little bit of dishwashing liquid, and I don't suggest using a harsh dishwashing liquid. I generally use Dapple, but there's Baby Ganix. There's a variety of them, dishwashing liquids that don't have harsh chemicals in them. So that's always a good idea.
Here's one that's less sticky.
Yes.
So you can see the yellow valve and the little tiny white membrane. Got our hands full here. And you can take that little white membrane off.
Yeah, so this membrane comes off. So I've definitely had people who come back to see me for their second baby, and some people don't know that this comes off. And what happens is when I go to take their parts apart, I pull this up and it's all filled with mold because no one ever taught them to take this off. So that's really important. And another thing is if this piece is not all the way down, so this one's kind of in, but not maybe all the way down like that. People will call and say, my pump's not working. And I always say, check your valve membrane, because 99% of the time, all you had to do is push this in so it's down. Otherwise, it can't form a vacuum. So that's really important to note,
Super, super important.
So
I think the key takeaways here are take everything all the way apart and make sure it's put all the way back together, right? And then in the meantime, read your manufacturer's instructions to find out what actually does come apart, because it's not necessarily intuitive.
Correct.
You know?
Yeah. So always check the manufacturer's instructions or call the company and they can just talk you through it if you don't feel like reading the instructions like most of us.
Yeah.
And then the parts for the Medela pump are going to be the valve membrane, the shield is a separate piece, and this piece here is called the connector. So you would take these, here, you hold this for a sec, and you would take this off and you would clean all these parts. So that's the Medela pump.
And don't let them wash down the drain.
Yes.
We've all done that accidentally. If it does, keep a backup set on hand. They're sold, you can see just little packs of valves and membranes that you can buy. You can get them pretty much anywhere. You can go to a lactation center,
right?
But you can also get them at Target. You can get them on Amazon. They're pretty easily accessible, so keep lots of backups of those on hand,
right,
in case they tear or they get lost, so you don't find yourself in trouble. Same with the duckbill valves. Those can tear really easily, especially if you're trying to pull it off the pump. So you want to keep backups of those valves on hand.
Yeah, and these pumps too, every couple months you're going to want to replace these, or if you're pumping more often, maybe even every month.
Yeah, and I know the CDC recommends, like you said, putting everything in the basin and then scrubbing with a brush, right? So get yourself a good bottle brush, get yourself a good safe soap, and then let everything dry on a drying rack, and you should be in pretty good shape. There you have it. There's also cool little things that you can get to clean those little nooks and crannies. You know, you want to be able to get to all the little pieces inside here, you know, like you can't necessarily reach that with your standard bottle brush. But once you take it all apart, you can get right inside there and get it nice and clean.
Yeah,
so
and
pretty handy.
This was, I remember when you got this. This is the OXO On The Go. So this was actually really nice because you can fit your brush in here, a place to dry your parts, and this was great for moms going back to work. So that fit in there nicely. I'm not sure you got this a long time ago, and
I did get it a long time ago.
I'm not 100% sure if they still make this.
They should. If they don't, they definitely should.
They should bring it back.
But look at this. This is like the size of a VHS. Does anyone even remember what a VHS tape is?
I do.
But yeah, but yeah, you could take this whole thing with your manual breast pump, put it in your cooler bag, and take the whole thing with you. And you've got your little on-the-go pumping thing. I just took this to a hotel probably 3 months ago for a conference.
Really?
So that I had a manual pump, a place to dry, and then a little travel soap.
Right.
And it was perfect.
It's great for travel. We do find that a lot of moms will just get an extra set of parts. So let's say they have to pump twice at work. They pump, they put all their stuff in a wet bag or in a plastic bag or whatever, and then they will go ahead and use their new parts, you know, their second set for the second pumping, and then they just wash it all when they get home. So
yeah, the parts are relatively inexpensive, and it's worth being able to get back to what you're doing, to not have to wash the pump parts immediately after every feeding. Then you can come home and you can bring them to your partner and say, hey, can you please wash these for me? Because I did the work of pumping, so can you do the work of washing? That's another good reason to put them in the bag too.
Right, there you go. the only other thing I would say is also remember to give your pump itself a once over.
Oh, and the tubes. We didn't talk at all about the tubes.
The tubes, right.
You definitely want to keep those tubes dry.
Right.
So like Gail mentioned, you don't actually have to wash this whole thing every single time you're pumping. In these tubes, whether it's the Spectra or whichever Medela pump you may be using, you want to keep these tubes dry because if moisture gets into these tubes, it can grow mold. So one of the things that I did, I remember you used to talk about the trick of like whipping them around. You remember that?
Yes.
But then what I always used to do is I would actually, I don't know if this is on.
It is on.
It is, but it's so quiet you could barely hear it.
Yeah,
Imagine
it's
that.
very, the symphony is almost silent.
Here, I'll turn it up. But I would actually, when I was done pumping, sort of just let it run with nothing attached, because then you're getting air going through those tubes, and that'll dry it out so that you don't end up with mold in your tubes. If you get mold in your tubes, you just want to replace them.
You have to buy new tubes, right?
Yeah, you can't really effectively get that out of there.
Yeah. And again, just sort of wiping down the actual pump, because you never know what bacteria you're carrying on your hands and stuff like that. So maybe once a day, wash down your pump, but not with like a lot of wet water. You might want to use like one of those Clorox wipes or something.
Medela
like
makes
that.
wipes
Medela
too. I
makes
think
really
breast
good
pump
wipes.
specific
Yeah.
wipes. I guess one thing we didn't mention that should be sort of obvious, but please wash your hands.
Yes.
Before
absolutely.
pumping, and then, obviously
cleaning
before
your
cleaning your
parts
parts,
and stuff like
and just
that.
always make sure that you're working with clean hands when you're handling any of your pump pieces.
Right. And your pump parts should be dry before you use them again. So that's
Another good reason to have multiple sets.
Right.
Because if you're
exactly.
pumping every 2 hours, if you have a baby in the NICU
Yeah.
and you have to pump every 2 hours, your parts are probably not going to be dry
Yes.
by the time you have to pump again.
Yeah. And
so,
sometimes insurance covers your parts too. So that's also could be money saving for you too.
like an FSA or an HSA card, you might be able to use
Yeah.
those
Oh,
if you
yeah,
can't
you
use
can.
your insurance.
You definitely can.
Yeah, definitely worth getting extra parts. I think that's it for cleaning. Try to have your partner clean your parts if you can, but otherwise, just make sure that you're taking everything all the way apart, putting it all the way back together, and checking with the manufacturer to be sure that you are following their instructions.
Right.
Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.